If you're an NBA fan or honestly a sports fan, we all have some things in common. We all dislike refs. We've been embarrassed at times to call yourself fan. We overreact a lot. The Kings are usually not good, but something we do often do is criticize our favorite team's head coach. In the NBA, every year there's a fan base that is calling for their head coach to be fired. We can follow as many blogs, news articles, journalists, and media surrounding our favorite teams, but we are not with them day in, day out. So we don't know how the words and schemes of the coach fall onto the players. Saying this to say that there isn't a concrete way of evaluating coaches. This is the case for every sport, but specifically basketball, that one person can trump a team scheme and a coach's voice can be null and void. Fam, coaches be getting fired off nothing more than vibes sometimes. What makes a head coach good varies from coach to coach. Different philosophies work for different personnel. However, we feel confident at spotting a bad coach. Which is weird because on the surface, the answer to whether Tom Thibodeau, a former two-time coach of the year, is actually a good coach is very easy, but can also be really difficult. This season is the first season in 15 years that Thibodeau is not coaching a team. After spending over 20 years as an assistant coach, he got his first head coaching shot for the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls weren't a bad team the previous year under Vinny Del Negro, or even during the Del Negro tenure. He went 82-82 over 2 seasons, but a 4-8 playoff record, one of them being the classic first round versus Boston. They just played well enough but ran into more talented teams overall when the playoffs came around. The success of this team was also centered around Derrick Rose, who was only in his rookie and sophomore seasons in the NBA at this time. Talking about how good young Derrick Rose was is a different video for a different day, but in his first 2 years, it was obvious the team had a star on their hands. He wasn't the only scorer on the team. Luol Deng averaged 17 himself, but he was truly the only creator, as with an average of 25% usage rate, he generated 1,043 points for his teammates, along with Rose himself scoring 1,619 points. The next player was Luol Deng with 1,000 points less in totals. When Thibodeau got the team, he inherited a team that overall was a good defense but a run-of-the-mill offense. The team improved from 41-41 to 62-20. Their good defense became elite, from 11th to 1st in team defensive rating, and their offense went from one of the worst to borderline top 10, 27th to 11th. The Bulls' three-point shooting became passable, going from the worst to league average, and efficient field goal percentage went from 28th to 15th. Some of this had to do with the new additions to the team. Kyle Korver is a respected and reliable three-point shooter. They went from offensive point guard Kirk Heinrich to Keith Bogans, who provided defense in the backcourt. Brought in an athletic forward in Ronnie Brewer, and they brought in Carlos Boozer, a former 2-time All-Star. With continued progression from Derrick Rose, he had his best season as a pro, on his way to his first and only MVP season. To think that this team was still slow even to 2011 standards, but we learned that Thibodeau's philosophy was have 1 or 2 offensive beacons while everyone else prioritizes defense or spacing. This works well. Mostly defense, let's be honest. This works when the offensive engine is a 22-year-old MVP, but the offense was still predictable with just better players. This showed in the playoffs. Tom's playoff debut as a head coach was pretty good. He went 9-7 with series wins over the Pacers, which was close throughout, even though they won in 5. They beat the Hawks in the next round, as they are similarly constructed to the Bulls, so the wins were back and forth but convincing. Finally, they ran into the Heatles, and well, that's all, folks. The Bulls did blow out the Heat in Game 1, but even though the games were close, they lost 4 straight. Looking at how the shots were divided up, Rose was getting baited into shooting, and it didn't seem there was more adjustment to that. Derrick Rose took 376 field goals and 101 threes in the playoffs. The next up was Deng, taking almost 150 less shots and almost 40 less threes than Rose. I don't want to compare it to mine because obviously you'll roll with LeBron and Wade most of the time, and their shot totals were even throughout the playoffs. I want to go back to the Atlanta series, and their shot totals told different stories. Josh Johnson led the playoffs in shots for Atlanta, taking 198 shots, with Josh Smith taking about 30 less shots than that. Jamal Crawford and Al Horford weren't even that far behind. A great defense, but a one-man offense that was predictable and doubled down upon itself in the postseason. But nobody's going to look at Tibbs crazy for losing to a team like Miami, especially since the team was better but not extremely talented. They addressed some of the concerns about that heading into the lockout shortened 2011-12 season. The three-point shooting went from league average percentage-wise to top 5 in the league as a team. Richard Hamilton joined the team, but good coaching call, CJ Watson got an uptick in minutes, and his shooting helped. Some of this was by necessity, with Rose missing time, but shots and points were spread out more. The pace was still slow and they were never getting to the line, but the offensive rating took a higher jump, ranking top 5 in the league. I'm not going to get too deep into the 2012 playoffs. Derrick Rose holding on to his knee, and down. He tore his ACL in Game 1 against the 76ers. The Bulls ended up losing that series, and no one's going to go after Tom for losing when your star gets hurt. The problem was the team got on paper better, but didn't seem to actually have real improvements in scheme. The Bulls averaged 98 points a game in the 39 games Rose played that season. That number dropped to 80 points in the 5 games that were played without Rose in the playoffs. The drop-off showed how much this offense wasn't Tom's scheme, but Rose being one of the best in the league. I truly believe that the 2012-13 season might be Tom's most impressive stretch as a coach. The team's offense across the board went down the drain with no Rose. It wasn't all doom though. The off-season additions of Marco Bellinelli, Nate Robinson, and bringing back Kirk Hinrich were amazing for the offense. Luol Deng continued scoring and defending at his rate, and Joakim Noah improved his game in a stellar way. He was often the team's hub on offense and defense. However, the team doubled down on defense as it was still elite, forced bad shots, and weren't fouling, and he probably used the most lineups that any other season so far. I should get into that. Thibodeau has a reputation for not expanding his lineups outside of the starters. In the first 2 years of his Chicago tenure, he actually did experiment a bit with rosters and lineups. He would default back to the starters most of the time, but there was a deviation from the original group. In the playoffs is where he actually gets his reputation. Teams do shorten rotations to the starting 5 most of the time. That's not bad, but having no nuance or counter shows that Tom was overly reliant on getting everything out of his starters without the talent to justify that heavy usage. In the 2011 playoff run, the Bulls used their starting 5 33% of the time. To put that in perspective, the 2011 OKC Thunder, who had almost as many games in the postseason as the Bulls and didn't use many lineups outside of the starters, was used 28% of the time. If the Thunder played as much as the Bulls, it would still have only been 29% of the time. This has always been debated, and D-Rose addressed it in his jersey retirement speech, but the fact that the Bulls were up comfortably in the 4th and Rose was still out there shows the reluctance that Tibbs has just to go to other players even in non-essential moments. Regardless of whether a significant injury would have occurred, had he not been in is kind of irrelevant. Rose missed 27 games in the lockout shortened season, but also logged 35 minutes a game in the games he did play. If you're expecting another deep playoff run, you need to pick and choose when to go all out with the minutes on a team that was already known for high usage. The starters ranked 21st in the minutes played while having Luol Deng lead the league in minutes played. But back to 2013, and like I said, many used lineups. 8 different lineups had logged at least 100 minutes, which I believe is the most he used. The offense took a nosedive. 3-point efficiency fell off a cliff. Overall efficiency fell off. And this team ran a slow offense and got to the line at average rate, a common trend for the Thibs Bulls. But they did crash the glass on the offensive side. Top 5 in offensive rebounding percentage, and they didn't turn over the ball, while being top 10 in assists as a team, which is the best so far. They finished 5th in the East and made it to the second round of the NBA playoffs before losing to Miami. No shame in that, honestly. They played amazingly against Brooklyn. Boozer and Nate played great, and Jimmy Butler picked up for Luol Deng, who struggled with his shot, and Hinrich, who missed the rest of the playoffs due to injury. He went back to the heavy starter usage in the playoffs. That's on course, but typically he defaults to better defensive lineups. The lineup he used the most, Robertson, Boozer, Bellinelli, Noah, Butler, lineup was one of the worst defensive lineups and offensive lineups. It was definitely the most talented they used, Robinson was a good offensive option, and Butler led the team in minutes played in the postseason, but the talent was limited, and it led to just being outmatched by, you guessed it, more talented teams. The next season was more or less the same. Rose only played 10 games, tore his meniscus in his other knee, and then got traded mid-season. The defense was amazing, the offense was ass. The difference was that Tibbs finally had a Defensive Player of the Year on his team, and he got that with Joakim Noah. He averaged 12 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 steal, and 1 block. Noah not only did win Defensive Player of the Year, he finished 4th in MVP voting. The offense subbed out Robinson for DJ Augustine, and with Boozer declining, they brought in Mike Dunleavy for shooting. It didn't help the overall team shooting, but it helped Jimmy, who became a starter, to get to the line the most of anybody on the team, and helped the team's overall ability to get to the line, which helped the offense. Even Rose wasn't getting to the line as often. The defense was better with a tandem of Noah and Butler. They won 48 games, and they lost in 5 to the Wizards in the playoffs, and shooting came back to bite them. Noah and Butler weren't consistent as scorers that year, and to put the shooting woes in perspective, Trevor Ariza in Game 4 of that series made more threes than the Bulls as a team. The 2014-15 campaign was the best coaching job for Thibodeau since his first season with the group. They won 50 games this season, but it's the first time I've seen deviation from Tom in terms of what he prioritized in the overall team's production. For the first time, they had a decent to borderline good offense. They ranked 11th in offensive rating as a team. The free throw rate increased and got better, and the three-point shooting became league average for only like the second time, all while maintaining a good percentage in offensive rebounding. The Bulls kept making good additions to weather changes on the team. Boozer got waived, but they signed Nikola Mirotic, who provided spacing, and Pau Gasol, who was an all-star. They brought in Aaron Brooks to be insurance for Rose, who played 51 games, was clearly still not fully 100%, and missed a chunk of the first half of the season due to an eye injury. In the games he played, Rose was not productive. More importantly, Jimmy Butler took a massive jump to being a real 20-point-a-game scorer. He won the Most Improved Player award while maintaining the same level of defense. Tom adjusted to the new personnel. They were worse on defense, still good overall, 11th in defensive rating, but it was to the benefit of the team's structure. They made it to the second round once again, but lost to the Cavs after beating the Bucks in the first round. The games the Bucks won, they got by, but the games that the Bulls won, they were dominating. Better rebounding, better scoring, better three-point shooting, and Jimmy Butler having a playoff coming out party. The Cavs were better almost in every way. A LeBron-led team will do that to you. But this series was actually pretty competitive. It also didn't help that after Game 3, Powell went down with injury, effectively ending the Bulls' chances. After going 255 and 139 with a 23-28 playoff record, Thibodeau was fired, and fans were not happy. I think it was a bit extreme. Even though he only made the conference finals once in this tenure, the team played well and he adapted quite well to his personnel. Players improved under his watch, and he got a bit better at his rotations. Another thing to point out about coaches is that they can sometimes get fired once again off pure vibes. This strikes me as a we're in the same spot and we need to change for the sake of change. 3 out of 5 playoff runs were ended by a team with LeBron on it, and the team's makeup and maybe his decisions with playoff rotation may have been also a reason as well. I will say it is harsh to fire a coach who sustained success the Bulls haven't seen in a while. Many fans would assume he wouldn't be out of a job for long, and well, they were right. He was hired to be the Timberwolves' new head coach. He would also get a say in team construction as well, and to build this team with its young nucleus but extremely talented nucleus of Andrew Wiggins, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Zach LaVine. Since this was a rebuilding project, the first year was nothing to note. They finished 31-51, and the team didn't change much with Thibodeau. A good offense with both Towns and Wiggins averaging above 20, but the defense sucked. Team scored very easily on them. They also only used 7 players and 2 lineups for most of the year. The Rubio, Zhang, LaVine, Wiggins, Towns lineup was the second most used lineup in the NBA that season. The lineups that did have better defensive ratings were the ones without Wiggins or Towns, or at least Wiggins. Maybe more defensive personnel could help his philosophy. He sure as hell did that because Tibbs wasn't just a coach. He was the GM as well, and he traded Levine and a pick that turned into Larry Markkinen to Chicago to get Jimmy Butler. He traded Ricky Rubio to Utah for a pick that turned into Josh Okogie the following year. He signed Jeff Teague and brought back Taj Gibson. People started calling the Timberwolves the Timber Bulls for Thibodeau's signing of his past Bulls players. He even signed Derrick Rose in the middle of the season. The Wolves won 47 games, the most the franchise had won since 2005, when they won 44, and the first time making the playoffs since 2004. It even had a final game of the season throw to get them as the 8th seed. The team still had the same identity: good offense, bad defense. They were more efficient than the year before, they got to the line better, and they still crashed the offensive glass. Moreover, they just had a more talented team than the year before. Butler and Towns were all-stars. Even though Thibodeau didn't always use the bench, there were good players like Bjelica, Jones, Gorgui Dieng, and Jamal Crawford. Jeff Teague was a solid offensive option. I mean it by the bench not getting too much opportunity. The starters led the league in minutes played. I mean it when I say the bench didn't get too many opportunities. The starters led the league in minutes played. The starters who played the lowest number of minutes per game was Teague and Gibson at 33. The highest bench players were Bjelica and Crawford, who played like 20 minutes a game. To put this in perspective again, the Hornets had the second most used lineup, and they still had guys like Jeremy Lamb, Frank Kaminsky, Cody Zeller all had a decent time in the offense. Lamb and Kaminsky had more minutes off the bench than anybody on the Wolves. The Wolves got rocked by the Rockets, with the only competitive game being Game 1. James Harden and Clint Capella were doing them the worst way. Thibodeau was fast-tracking this team to winning, but one thing I haven't talked about yet that makes a good coach is team morale. And this team was very dysfunctional. Butler wanted a new contract and was away from the team before publicly demanding a trade. He did an interview where he called out the toughness of the Wolves' young core, seemingly aimed at Towns and Wiggins. He felt that they were underpaying him to max out Wiggins and Towns, and he felt as if he was doing the bulk of the work. The infamous practice, where he took the bottom of the barrel, deep in the barrel rotation, and beat the starters, and then proceeded to cuss out everyone, specifically Cat. The team was playing cat and mouse with the media about all of this. Wiggins, who was cool with Butler, if you let Iguodala and Draymond tell you, clashed with Butler in terms of on-the-court production and to accommodate Butler. Wiggins was losing a role in the offense, and it didn't seem like Tibbs cared much about his development. Also, to Thibodeau, his offense was very boring and very predictable. He didn't utilize other rotations where it could have been beneficial for the defense. Lineups with Tyus Jones yielded better defensive results, but Tyus was still fighting for minutes with Derrick Rose. In the playoffs, Rose played 24 minutes a game to Tyus' 13 minutes a game. He also festered this environment that put the older vets against the younger nucleus. Butler wanted to be traded, and Tibbs didn't want to do that, at least not at the beginning of the season, and Glenn Taylor, the owner, wanted to deal him. Everything was falling apart with many problems, and there were some answers. One of them was trading Butler for whatever was available. The other was firing Thibodeau. He spent the rest of the 2019-20 season unemployed until July 30th, 2020, where he was hired by New York. This was a question of whether the Thibodeau philosophy had a lasting power in today's NBA. Does heavy minutes benefit teams that play legitimately faster now? Does his no days off approach work when accolades haven't followed with his attitude? Can he build a culture that takes pride in the work when it only seems to be a few players getting opportunities? Knicks fans were skeptical of the hiring. The Knicks have seen a full decade of being mediocre or being cheeks, so them going from dumpster fire to 500 would be a significant improvement for them. He can develop players, and in some contexts, put players in positions to improve and showcase their talents in competitive environments. He also trains hard and expects accountability. However, it takes a genius to have a team to make the playoffs for the first time in 15 years, and the team is somehow more dysfunctional than it was when they were losing. He brought in his old reliable and never showed interest in experimenting when his teams aren't talented enough to have such heavy reliance on just a core group of guys. The 2020-21 Knicks improved a lot during the first year under Thibodeau. The team went from 23rd in defense rating to 3rd. Although the offensive rebounding went down, the overall rebounding went up. They took better threes, even they took them at the same rate, which means not much. They were harder to score on and scored more efficiently. Maybe because of necessity, due to Mitchell Robinson's injury and Derrick Rose being in and out of the lineup. Tom used slightly more lineups and players did get some run. The Stars still played like the 5th most minutes together. Tom Thibodeau's style of offense, the Stars play high volume of minutes and are going to have a high volume of touches, was beneficial for Julius Randle, who put together the best season of his career. He made his first All-Star team, made the All-NBA second team, and with an uptick in scoring, assists, field goals, and three-point percentage, won the most improved player. Then the playoffs happened. Tom's offensive philosophy works, but it's vulnerable to better offensive teams or just more dynamic offensive players. Insert Trae Young, who made a name for himself at the expense of the Knicks. Didn't help him that the best player was a 32-year-old Derrick Rose, while Randle was doing the performance that can be best described as basketball if you were drunk. Next season's hard to describe because the team didn't change much. The defense got slightly worse, but still good, and the offense was slightly better, but still subpar. They attacked the basket better, and this is probably the best three-point shooting team of any of the Tom Thibodeau-led teams. They've had a healthy Mitchell Robinson this season. This had them at the best rebounding team in the NBA. They were already bad at playmaking. They somehow got worse. I don't even truly put all the blame on Thibs because the point guards that he got for this season were players that are kind of out of their prime and got injured a lot. We already know the deal with Rose, but they signed Kemba Walker and his knees fell apart. Playing for Tibbs expedited this, so no point guard meant the point guard duties fell to Randle and Barrett, and both were slightly worse than the year prior. What I can blame Tibbs for is that Emmanuel Quickley should have been starting, but he only started 3 games. However, he assisted the second most points on the team behind Randle. The Knicks lineups that were mostly used for them and around the league were Randle, Barrett, Robinson, Fournier, and a mix between Kemba Walker and Alec Burks. They got the answer for the point guard by signing Jalen Brunson, who had a breakout in Dallas, with Dallas selecting not to extend him. It also helps that his dad works for the Knicks and has been working under Tom Thibodeau for years. The addition of Brunson and a better season from Randle brought the Knicks to having the 3rd best offensive rating in the NBA. Outside of getting to the line, they weren't great in any one area of offense or efficient, but they had a talented 2-man game and that helped. The defense took a backseat, although they were still a good rebounding team. They won 47 games and were the 5th seed. They beat the Cavs in 5, and it was Brunson's showcase, but also Josh Hart as well. He's another really good Tom Thibodeau player. He can score, but is mostly a valuable asset in his rebounding at 6'5" and has a high motor. They won like how they won in the season, rebounding and getting to the line. They went up against the 8th seed Miami Heat team, and it was assumed that this was a good matchup to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. They lost. To make it less of a sting, this was a historic Heat team, and they did something only a few teams have ever done: make the finals as an 8th seed. Also, more impressive that Butler, would you look at that, missed the game in this series. Quickley also got hurt and put more stress on Brunson as they had no other point guards in the rotation. He played well, and for what it's worth, Barrett also put together a good series. They lost to a team that had a better offense, even though they weren't a better shooting team. The offense sometimes devolved into Brunson or Barrett ISOs. Once again, we had a disappointing Randle performance. He played great in Game 5 and followed that with a terrible Game 6 to seal the deal. I only marginally blame Thibodeau for that series because he could have divided the minutes better. They lost to a team that is almost the anti-version of himself. Spoelstra played 6 players over 10 minutes in that series. Thibodeau only had 3. Brunson played 31 minutes a game. The next was RJ at 21 minutes a game. You have to play your most talented guys and just trust them, so playing Randle was inevitable. But they could have had more minutes for someone like Isaiah Hartenstein, who played well when he was out there, but he was only out there for like 9 minutes a game. The 23-24 season was, in my opinion, the most balanced team of a Tom Thibodeau coached team. They won 50 games and were in the top 10 in both offensive and defensive rating. A lot of the league stats were still similar for better or worse, but the team was more balanced with talent and Tom used more lineups equally. He used 4 different lineups all in the same tier of minutes usage. Some of this was out of necessity and not like a change of scheme, because midway through the season, Randle went down with injury. But the Knicks also traded Quickly and Barrett for OG Anunoby mid-season. They were second in the East and beat the Sixers in a really competitive series. Many of the moves was to help playoff runs, as with Brunson doing the scoring, and he did a lot of that. He led the series in points. We saw Josh Hart be a Swiss Army knife out of a lab paid for by Tom Thibodeau. Deuce McBride had his name called and provided shooting and getting a sudden minutes boost in the playoffs. The second round was another hard-fought series between the 7-seeded Pacers, and the Knicks are the more talented team. That playoff-proofed lineup, even without Randle, who's out for the playoffs, they lost the series. They fought their asses off now. This wasn't just a humiliation ritual. We'll get to that. But when I said this team, for better or worse, are kind of the same, here's the worst. Their offense is insanely one-dimensional. You could get away with it when Brunson is playing MVP basketball. You can stop getting away with it when you face a team and a coach with more complexity in their offensive approach. The Pacers won the assist battle by a wide margin. The team was also completely gassed, something Thibodeau can become once we get deeper in the postseason. Along with Randle, Robinson was also hurt for this series. It was clear that Brunson and Hart were laying through legit injuries. It's basketball, so injuries happen, but Brunson and Hart ranked 10th and 11th in minutes played through the regular season, while Hart played an average of 42 minutes a game in the postseason, and in the Sixers series, averaged 46 minutes a game. Brunson led the NBA in shot attempts for the playoffs. He only took 32 less shots than Jason Tatum, who would go on to play more games en route to a championship. Game 7 against the Pacers would have been an LOL level blowout if it wasn't for Dante DiVincenzo and Burks playing legacy games, as Brunson ran out of steam. I haven't even talked about Anunoby, who was on drugs that were probably banned in like 15 countries. Trading for Mikal Bridges and Karl-Anthony Towns, old friend, ahead of the 24-25 season got Thibodeau a top 5 offense in the league. They didn't make many shots in terms of attempts, but they made the ones they took, with efficiency stats being the top 10 for 2s and 3s. The playmaking was the biggest improvement, becoming a borderline top 10 team in assists. The defense slid quite a bit to league average with Towns as a starting center, but Thibodeau relied heavily on the defensive players in the lineup. The stars played the most minutes together out of any lineup in the NBA, so a lot was tacked onto guys like Anunoby, Bridges, and Hart to counter a Brunson-Town-led team. It made sense because the reward was having two legit all-star and all-NBA level players averaging damn near 25 a game. They got the 3rd seed and had a really fun series against the Pistons that was competitive, and they won off good shooting and a great series from Cat. An even greater series and clutch play from Brunson. They played the Celtics, and setting aside Tatum's injury that spoke the end for the Celtics against them, I still think they would have lost the series even if Tatum was healthy. He was having a monstrous series, but this was the Celtics at their most 3-point spamming. They lost game 1 because they went 15 for 60 from 3. The Celtics offense was also good but predictable, and after Tatum went down, they couldn't even lean on talent. All this and still a great Brunson series again, and a good shooting from Hart and Anunoby got the Knicks to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time since the year 2000. They played the Pacers again, and now here we can talk about the humiliation ritual. Many people had the Knicks as the better team, and if they were healthy, maybe it would be different. The Pacers were like shitting the bed in game 1, and setting aside Tyrese Halliburton's theatrics, it seemed like a new player took turns doing the Knicks wrong. Aaron Nesmith scored 15 in like 3 minutes in game 1 to get them back so Halliburton could do the theatrics. The Brunson-Towns defensive sets were stopping none of the Pacers' fast and efficient offense. Siakam got anything he was looking for out there. It took Thibodeau till game 5 with Towns in foul trouble to try something new, and they won that game. Maybe if these adjustments were sooner, the Pacers wouldn't build that momentum, and this series could have been more interesting. The Pacers convincingly beat the Knicks, and Thibodeau looked like he got outcoached. After a 229 and 173 record and a 24 and 23 record in the postseason, Thibodeau was fired, and fans were now mixed and neutral. I guess we all come full circle. Some found it harsh and kind of funny that a coach who helped the Knicks get to a conference finals. And have success that they hadn't seen since the early 2010s would get fired. Some thought that he just did a remix of what he did in Chicago. They won, but never elevated to real contention. They were losing in the same way, and unlike the Bulls tenure, LeBron ain't here to give you a clear out of why you're losing. The Knicks were losing to teams that you should be able to beat. They lost to the Pacers in dramatic fashion, back to back. Fans saw lineup management deteriorate under him. He used some more lineups, but he had to be forced to do that. Guys like Bridges and Hart already had reputations of playing heavy minutes or not missing games, but that's all fun and games until the postseason, where everyone is one slip or one bad break away from playing a series even more hurt than they already were. Bridges even had to step in and ask Thibodeau to play the bench core. It didn't help that players buried in a depth chart were going on to be good contributors to other playoff teams and championship teams like Hartenstein and Obi Toppin. Is Tom Thibodeau a good coach? I would say yes, but he's probably the archetype of a coach I dislike the most, which is being brutally one-dimensional. Other than the Timberwolves series, he can build a culture and get players to work hard. Joakim Noah talks about his practices being tough and working on defensive slide drills the day after a game. Kyle Korver was confused, but then they saw how they were the best in the league on defense. Thibodeau's foundation of defense and toughness made everyone accountable and got everyone to put forth effort, because if you didn't, you weren't going to play. Even if he didn't use many rotations or combinations of players, there are players who did get opportunities from this style of coaching, and if you could prove it, you're going to be on the floor. He's also loyal to the guys and players who got opportunities to rebuild their image and grow within his system. However, the downside is that he never found a way to get good offense outside of just having superstar level players. His teams ran a slow pace consistently at the bottom of the league throughout all the times he's been a coach. This would show itself worse in the playoffs when he would run into teams or coaches with more complex offenses. His style of coaching put emphasis on the stars being able to play high volume of minutes and only using one or two guys consistently off the bench. This workload for teams that are not super talented in the grand scheme of things can make a team very predictable in a playoff series. Why should an opposing team game plan for players who aren't getting in? It also gets players tired. The lineup that extended their season in the last Pacers series, putting Hart on the bench for Robson, had to be suggested by Josh Hart. Finally, although he is loyal, tired players and an underused bench is going to create issues in the locker room, something that came out in both New York and Minnesota. Tom will get another coaching job, but in the end, in the biggest market in basketball, he was brought in to maximize strength and minimize weaknesses. Bring back the standard of winning and winning a championship once a superstar is in place. He only half did this. It makes me believe that Thibodeau is more suited to be coaching a team that is trying to establish a foundation of winning and consistency. When they are good enough to start competing, he will need to get a good set of assistant coaches to fill in the blanks. I don't want this to be he's too tough for this generation of players. Other coaches have similar approaches of coaching and have had better success than Thibodeau. Thibodeau is probably the best coach to not even get to the finals. If he wants to change that, being able to adapt to his team or even the game itself is a non-negotiable. His reputation preaches being a tireless workhorse. And I'm not denying Tibbs' work ethic, but just as it's important to work hard, it's important to work smart. And I think that's what Thibodeau needs to do more than anything else. And there is a team that's going to hire him that hopes he figures that out. That's it. Look, I haven't made videos in a while. I've had a lot of life changes, but I'm back, and I'm back to making the videos I want to make in this way. Sometimes it's going to be something current, sometimes that it's not going to be current. I can tell you guys right now, the next video is going to be about John Wall, basically a career breakdown, and that's going to be a long video, so that's about it. Thank you guys for watching. Do all the YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll talk to y'all in the next one. Take it easy.